Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Huddersfield Town Social. My name is Greg Marah, and I'm pleased to host this podcast after a win, battling 1-0 win over Queen's Park Rangers. Joining me as ever is Cameron Pope, who has just informed me that he wants to do the 43 unbeaten before he, no doubt, decides to jump ship. Batley-Kaye joins me as well alongside the return for Mr. Tristan Batley-Kaye. I will say this: I was more enthralled with the Six Nations yesterday, so I've done a watch it a bit later on. But I'm sure some of you watched it live. As I said, dogged 1-0 win, Town's first 0 win according to Mr. Chicken for God, how many months is that now? 4, 5? Well, all of the teams have managed it. We've been leaking goals. Well, we've been leaking goals. Junior Bakuna's howitzer the difference between the two teams, and 3 points that should, asterisk next to it, should see Town safe. What do we make of that?
Well, I came out very, very early on in the season, about the midway point through, saying that, okay, we've done enough now to avoid relegation. That was December, and that was a hill I'm willing to die on. So I'm very glad to see that we've taken these massive 3 points. Now, I spent my afternoon commentating on rugby league, so I too watched it later. But at one point, I used to remark that you'd see more forward passes from the Giants than you would from Huddersfield Town's midfield on any given Saturday. So it was quite nice to see such a positive performance when I watched the game back in the evening. And there is no question that is an enormous win, and especially as well given the context of the Birmingham result. And okay, there remains much football to be played, but now the crucial thing is our destiny is in our own hands. And okay, you look at the league table from last season, Barnsley survived on 49 points. Of course, the fact that there were points deductions in both seasons skews those figures a little bit, but by my count, about 45 points should be enough, really. So 4 points, technically, from what we've got now. And that'll particularly be enough if we get them against Wednesday this week, against Coventry, against Rotherham. The fact that we're playing teams below us is huge, and Rotherham have got games coming out of their ears. This is the biggest win, I think, of the season, given the timing of it and the value that you can put on those 3 points. And it was encouraging, too. Again, 3-5-2 did the job, only served to further my belief that that's our most effective shape. Encouraging, starting from the back to see a solid performance from Ryan Schofield, fantastic stop in the first half. It's a pleasure to see Lewis O'Brien as well, finding his feet in the centre of the park now. We've seen that he's been more of himself when he's been playing out wide, so I enjoyed seeing what he can do in the centre of the park. Juninho Bacuna, well, that's just him in a nutshell, really, isn't it? Largely absent for huge swathes of the action, and then he springs back to life just when his critics are coming out on the HGFC hashtag and when you most need him. And let's be under no illusions, okay? We were helped by the fact that QPR offered very little. Dogged is the right word, I think, really. That's going to become increasingly more commonplace now that the pocket of teams in mid-table realise that they've very little to play for other than pride and that positional bonus. The main disappointment, because, we can't be 100% positive after that, can we? It was only a 1-0 win, even if it was our first one since the 3rd century BC. But I think Aaron Rowe, okay, it's a run of classy performances from him, and it's a shame after such a run of good showings that he didn't really get into the game. He fell short yesterday. I wasn't surprised to see he was taken off. But, and crucially again, and another reason why these 3 points are massive, is the fact that he's young and learning, and now, hopefully, if we can add to this with a win in midweek against an out-of-sorts Wednesday, the pressure is all but off, and he can continue to develop unbowed, because there's definitely an upward trajectory with him, as with Ryan Schofield. So 3 points couldn't have come at a more important time now. And this time next week, hopefully, we'll have Huddersfield Town sat on 44 points and as good as safe for another season.
It's strange how that result or that performance felt so positive, because if you look at the stats, it was anything but. It was a proper strong away performance for me. We had 33% possession. That must be the lowest ever Carlos has had in a competitive fixture, I would think. But we were effective, a word that I've used a lot around other teams that have played against us about how effective they've been. We had 13 shots and 7 corners. I mean, 13 shots more than we had in probably before we shifted formation in the previous 10 games. So, I was really pleased. I thought we did everything right in the game. And with you, Cam, I thought QPR looked like they were already playing in the flip-flops. The players are already on the proverbial beach, I think, aren't they? So there's an element of that. But I think the reason we won yesterday can be summed up in 2 words, and that's Jonathan Hogg. I thought he made all the difference yesterday. We are a completely different team. And I think early in the season, there were a few people, including me, I have to say, wondering if Jonathan Hogg's best days were behind him and he was a spent force and wouldn't fit into the way Carlos wanted to play. But he was everything that you want to see from a Town player yesterday. He was determined, driving his teammates on. You know, there was a couple of occasions where people made a mistake and he didn't accept the mistake. You know, they got a round off him and that was great to see. But I thought the whole team played well. I thought Sarr and Keogh concentrated on defending and stopped trying to be footballers. You know, they did what they had to do, and I thought that was great. And with you, I thought it was Rowe's quietest game since he's been starting. But Lewis O'Brien, absolutely, he must have run miles yesterday, Lewis O'Brien, miles. And yeah, I mean, Bacuna, what can you say about that bloke? I'd have subbed him at half-time. So I think I'll stick to being a Twitter expert and leave the real football to Carlos, because he clearly knows what he's doing. But he also made some good subs, I thought. I thought the subs that he brought on were effective. They also helped bolster the game. It was a good performance all round and leaves us in a really strong position. We got 5 out of 9, Greg, not the 7 out of 9 I wanted, so we weren't a million miles away. And if we win on Wednesday, and I know it's a big if, and I don't want to count the chickens, that would put us 16 points above Sheffield Wednesday, and depending on Wycombe's result midweek, anywhere between 15 and 18 points above Wycombe. So surely that would mean we're playing to avoid last place. So I think win Wednesday. I don't want to tempt fate, but I think if we win Wednesday, it's as good as over.
Yeah, I don't disagree with either of you there. I thought it was quite a compact and quite an effective performance, and which is quite surprising probably for Carlos. He's usually about the kind of, you know, the style and everything like that. And as we've alluded to, you know, it was Cowley-esque. I said to Gaz before, and I think the difference with the Cowleys, I don't quite think we have the same cuteness almost in managing the game still. But I thought yesterday, something that I did notice, we obviously started quite brightly, probably first 10 or 15 minutes. I thought we looked really good. But we seem to drop into a kind of a 5-1-4 formation, almost with no sort of strikers, with Mbenza and Campbell dropping almost into to fill the wing positions, which I thought made us, particularly somewhere like Loftus Road, that's quite sort of narrow and compact ground. It made us look really compact. And I think at times when we needed to go long, we went long. Sometimes because we'd gone into that formation, I thought perhaps we gave the ball away a little bit too much. But I did think that kind of set up the grounding for a really quality sort of away win, and that's kind of that's how you really want to win away from home, isn't it? You know, seeing us sort of grind out a performance and nick a goal and kind of defend well. Just echoing your thoughts, Gaz, I thought Sarr was fantastic. I thought he was commanding. I thought he put his head in, you know, quite a lot where perhaps in previous weeks we've not had that, and he won the ball in the air a lot. I think Edmonds Green, bizarrely, although I thought he was relatively quiet, and sometimes when he gets isolated kind of in a full-back position, he's maybe a tad suspect, but I feel like he adds a bit of mobility to the back line that is really quite important for the back line. Sarr and Keogh obviously probably don't have that kind of pace, but I think Edmonds Green seems to add something to the back line. And Schofield obviously made some great saves, and I actually thought, because he has got a load of pelters recently, there was a point in the first half where a ball came in from the wing from QPR quite low, and he dived out and caught the ball, and I thought, that seems to me like he's at least trying to kind of listen to the sort of the doubters and work on his game a little bit more, because that's definitely the side of the game that he struggles with. And again, I'd just say again, frustratingly, I like Bacuna, but frustratingly, that did absolutely sum him up. From the sublime to the ridiculous at times. He sort of flits in and out of games and kind of cruises through games and then pops up just when you need him. So I thought, yeah, great great away performance and something that we can build on hopefully for the rest of the season.
Just want to make reference to a couple of individual performances. And I don't particularly like scapegoating people like some town fans do. They've always got to have a certain player that they despise. I think poor Ryan Schofield's been on the kind of the tough end of that recently, but he's one of the players I want to pick out. Ryan Schofield made a fantastic save, well, double save actually in that first half that kind of kept sound in the game. Helped assist towards her 3 points from Todd Kane. Gaz has already mentioned Jonathan Organ. I think Danny Cowley on was it Quest TV that Football League's on nowadays summed it up perfectly. I think we haven't won a game this season without Jonathan Organ in the team. That's someone else that I want to pick out, and those two for different reasons have got pelters this season, and those two have played well yesterday. A massive part in that victory, and you know it's kind of slowly seeing why Schofield's in the team. It was a real, and I'm not sure if any of you guys saw it. Cam probably would have done because he's a little bit of a geek with this, but the kind of stats section with each and every single goalkeeper in the championship and what they're good at and not very good at, and what Ryan Schofield's very good at is shot stopping, which everyone says, well, that's what keepers are supposed to do, but he's very much above average. He's in the top 4 or 5 in the league for it compared to saves that should have been an XG. So that's a massive key moment, key confidence booster for him. But Gaz has already said it. Jonathan Ogg, his tenaciousness, his leadership, which is something you cannot underestimate. He gives us the vibrancy to perform, and his ability. And I'm nicking a line from Mr. Kilroy, so before he no doubt interferes with this podcast in some way, starts whinging and stealing stuff from him. But the ability in the role that he played yesterday, dropping into the back three, certainly, well, it helps us win those 3 points. So I don't know about you two, but if you're looking at individual performances, you can't look past the two I've just mentioned, can you?
Not on the day, but I think Hoggy didn't play in the previous 2 games, and I think the team he came into had built themselves a solid base. What we mustn't forget in the last 3 games is we've only conceded 1 goal, which is just that's not Carlos Corber handball, is it? Conceding 1 goal in 3 games. I just thought Hoggy made the difference. He added that extra dimension of not just keeping the opposition out, but giving us a bit of drive. And when I say drive, I don't mean he picked out a 40-yard Hollywood ball to somebody on the wing. I mean just his energy and the way he went about his business. The example he sets for some of those other people in the team. You forget Bakuna's 23, he's still a youngish guy. But what an example to be playing alongside in terms of work rate and commitment and attitude. You can't do better than Jonathan Ogg, I don't think. Certainly not at this level.
I personally like to add to that. I think yeah, okay, Jonathan Hogg was again exemplary in coming back into the side, and you can see what he brings. And okay, in the last couple of years, there's been times, especially when we were in the Premier League, say, where he was criticised for slowing the game down, etc., and doesn't do enough between the lines, isn't always positive enough with his play. I think he's a welcome addition to the side, and I think he's you can see the effect that he has on his return. And I think as well, just the psychological effect he has on those around him. He's such a great mentor. He's a physical presence, and you need that. You need that. You need that loud focal point in a side, especially one that's not blessed with experience like ours. But yeah, I don't want to do disservice to the rest of the squad. And whilst a lot of people were eulogising him in the post-match and crediting him almost single-handedly with Town's resurgence, I think that does a little disservice to the players who've been involved in the last few weeks. I think that this has been the culmination of steadily stronger performances. I don't think I'm too risque in saying there. I think that it's been slowly developing as we've looked a bit more assured of ourselves, and Hogg coming back certainly added to it. But no, I think we've gradually towed our way to looking a little bit more resolute. And yeah, our goals conceded record in the last few games certainly goes some way of showing that.
Just to add on that, I think probably for me, the thing that Hogg does is allow everybody else to do their jobs. And I think the key one for me, and at the start of the season we kind of thought, who's this Lewis O'Brien kid that he didn't churn out the performances that he did last season. but slowly we've started to see Lewis as well. And I think the one thing for me with O'Brien is he needs to carry the ball. You know, passing the ball isn't really his forte, but driving with the ball is completely and utterly, you know, his quality and where his kind of best skills lie. And I think it was actually Lewis O'Brien that carried the ball up from a pass from Sarr that put Pippa in for Bakuna's goal yesterday. So, you know, I think the key bit there is Hogg allows that to go on around him. You know, as it's been alluded to, he drops into that back four that allows the wingers, the fullbacks to bomb on. He allows kind of Bakuna and O'Brien a bit of license as well. So yeah, I think we underappreciate Hogg at times, and maybe his footballing abilities don't always shine through, but his presence on the pitch really does.
Nice to hear some positivity. Wonderful, isn't it? We've all touched on it. How Town have gone. Is it fair to say back to basics? But it's also nice to see that Carlos O'Brien has understood that this. What I don't. Can you say he's got a plan B? I think this is the question I'm trying to ask, because we've seen an evolution in the tactics he's used. As Gareth said earlier, we've almost gone back to playing cowley ball, which, you know what, fans are suddenly happy with, because, you know, we're winning one games 1-0. But the evolution within this team is quite stark from where we were a few weeks ago to where we are now. There's a more solidity about the team that's carrying players that a month ago were looking as fragile as well. And my Hermes, delivery man who's just chucked a box of balls into your back garden without anyone not knowing, until your next door neighbour bangs on your door and said, "Oh, I've just found this in my green bin." But is it that he's got a plan B, or is it more that he's finally adjusted to the fact that this squad has not got the ability that he needs to play style of football?
Well, I think I'm going to say the latter more than anything, because, okay, 3-5-2, it's no mystery. We've been playing that on and off throughout the whole campaign since he came in. And so, yeah, I think that it's been managing expectations really, and realising that, okay, this is the way he wants to play, and that, yeah, it may be a fantastic way of playing in the Championship, but you can only use the ingredients you got on the table in front of you. And I think perhaps it's just now taking stock and realising, okay, redressing the expectations in that we're not going to push on as we might have hoped to, that we might have done at one point in the season, and really it's limiting the damage. And now that we've understood, certainly on the bench, that, okay, we don't have the depth and able to challenge in this league, then yeah, I certainly think now that the outlook on games has changed, and now that we're not punching or trying to punch so high as we were, we've now settled for, I don't want to say settle for less, actually, because no, I think we were overstretching ourselves, and now we're looking to play at our level, and that is why I think we're seeing more confident performances. Players aren't being asked too much of themselves, and the only shame is that it took so long to do this as well. We've been saying it for a very long time, but we knew that the squad on paper was nowhere near as good as those at the top end of the Championship, and especially after January as well. And so yeah, I'm glad that it came back now, though, and not in a few weeks' time. We've actually got time now where we might have a bit of a breather towards the end of the season. But yeah, in terms of adaptability, I don't want to take the gloss off what Carlos has done completely, because I think that, yeah, okay, he's certainly not been afraid to experiment this season, has he? We've seen a few different shapes, etc., 4 at the back and 3 at the back as well, and he's not afraid to tailor that to the opposition. But what I'd like to see now is more of the fact that we're sticking to what we can do and not trying to play into opposition's hands anymore, as much more. And if we can refine the way that we play, and I hope that that's 3-5-2, then that's got to be a good way forward.
Normally, if you're talking about a plan B, you're talking about the ability to change a team or a shape during a match. So if you're playing one way and it's not working, then you play another way, and that might get a result. I think that's what fans were referring to as a plan B. And with you, Cam, I think I don't know if I said it last week, I just think Carlos realised we were in a relegation battle, and I think he was banging his head on a wall around wanting to play how he wanted to play. He has got a clear idea, I think. The problem we've got is the quality of the players in areas You know, when they're as unpredictable as they are at Championship level, one week they can look like world beaters, and the next week they can look like Sunday leaguers. And he was struggling to deal with that. You know, he doesn't have the experience to perhaps coach some of that out of people. So I think we'll probably see him playing the way we are, this conservative style, until we're safe. And then I think we might see a slip back. I think he might drop a few of the young lads in and give people like Scott High full matches. You know, I think that's probably, you know, maybe even Kieran Phillips get a full game, that kind of thing, once we're safe. So is it a plan B? Not really. I think it's just a shift in thought process by Carlos. He's realised he can't do what he wants to do with the players he's got. I guess at some point we'll get around to talking about next season, and I guess next season will be a big deciding factor. You know, will the players that are here still be here? Will we have new players that are here? And if they are new players, are they going to be the players that can play the way Carlos wants? Otherwise, we're going to find ourselves in March next year applauding 1-0 defensive wins again, aren't we?
Yeah, I think in terms of a plan B, I'm probably with you as well, guys. That I think we did try to play three at the back before Christmas. I think it was maybe Blackburn at home before Christmas, and a couple of other games where it seemed to have moved to a three at the back, and he seemed to want to do that, and then all of a sudden we got an influx of injuries, which I don't want to put too much kind of onus on that, but I certainly think that it impacted on kind of, he didn't have the tools to play maybe the way that he wanted to at all times, and I think a second part to that is we certainly, and I think I mentioned this previously when I was last on the pod, that we started off the season and we were all raving about kind of this intensity and this tempo and filling the box and all that kind of thing, and we've certainly not seen that, and I just wonder whether that is, you know, a culmination of kind of how he wants us to play, how he wants us to train, how, you know, how the schedule kind of has come at us a little bit, and maybe not the depth in the squad, as we sort of alluded to, you know, the quality and depth in the squad that he wants. And I think in all honesty, that then goes back into the first bit. Three at the back allows for almost an anchor to sit behind someone like Sarr and Edmonds Green, that allows them to run out with the ball and play out with the ball, with a bit of a stopgap and a safety behind them, where we were getting caught earlier in the season with two centre halves splitting. One of them gives it away, and the opposition are straight in there. So I think to a certain extent he has got a plan B. I think possibly he's been hampered a little bit by what he's got at his disposal.
Wiser footballing head would also note that Jonathan Hogg allowed, yesterday especially, dropping back into that back three, allowed all three of the centre backs to have a lot of options when they did get a ball. I'm not going to say who this tactical genius is, because he's got an ego and he lives down under, but that's what he sent in my chat to say on this podcast. I'll leave that for him to say when he can be asked to turn up properly next week. Anyway, I'll leave it there, because I think when you've won a game like that, I think it's best not to pick it apart, because I think it's important as fans that we can enjoy a win. It was a very good win as well, which leaves us nicely placed in the league table, quite a fair bit clear of our opponents midweek, as we've mentioned already. Sheffield Wednesday, who sit 13 points behind us in 23rd, even though they have 2 games in hand, and the final relegation place occupied by the COVID hit Rotherham United, who have 4 games in hand now over Town, but obviously their schedule is going to be pretty intense to the end of the season. It'll be pretty difficult for them to actually finish the season after the breakout of COVID. They're 22nd and we're 9 points ahead of them. Birmingham, Coventry, Derby all sitting below us, and we're now level with Nottingham Forest, just goal difference keeping us apart. My next question to you all is: did you hear the podcast this week? Dean Hoyle spoke. Candidly, I think might be the best way of saying it, but he came out and said more in an hour than the club with their monthly communications did probably have done all season. It was interesting. A lot of the questions that people would want to ask haven't been answered, but there were certainly a few interesting points that I took from that, especially, I'd say, in and around our time in the Premier League and kind of the fallout from the departure of Stuart Webber. What did you make of it?
Well, I think the first, having listened to it, and then I listened to it yesterday afternoon, and having had a chance to think about it, I feel a little sad, really. I think what's the saying? Don't be sad because it's over. Be pleased it happened, or something. And I think that's a bit how I feel about it. You know, it's clear the second season broke Dean and almost broke the club. You know, it's easy to say now, but perhaps getting relegated and that fabulous night at Chelsea, if that never happened, we might be looking at a very, very different scenario now. But we are where we are. In true Dean style, he was really honest about the things he wanted to be honest about. He did dance around a few other things, which I guess we'll pick on at some point. But yeah, it was sad to listen to him talk about the club almost as though he'd fallen out of love with it. You know, he was and will be, along with David Wagner, an integral part of probably the best period I'll ever have supporting Huddersfield Town. So, you know, for him to talk in that way was a little sad. But, you know, he clearly is a man that's got changed priorities in life. I think when you've been as ill as he has, that's probably understandable. And we'll get onto the money bit in a little bit if you want. But, you know, I think he was very honest. I think the bit I want to talk about first of all really was the sale of the club and the choices he had. He took the choice to sell to Phil. You know, he pursued Phil clearly, so Phil didn't approach him. He approached Phil, and he turned down 2 foreign buyers who offered him all his money back straight away. But he was worried about the future of the club. But he danced around Phil's ability to invest. He talked about social media abuse aimed at Phil, which, as we've said on here, some of it is ridiculous. But that does feel like an easy cop-out, you know, saying that everything on social media is unreasonable, because some of the stuff that goes on social media and the questions that are asked of the club, I think, are perfectly reasonable and perfectly logical, but never seem to get answered. You know, and you know, he did say the foreign investors would have planned to have had a go for a couple of years. So who knows where that would have led us. But yeah, you know, I think a guy that's followed Town in the late 70s, you know, lived his dream and owned his boyhood club, now talking about not really being interested in football and not bothered about going to games. I thought that was pretty sad, really.
Well, I feel for Dean too on that note, because no matter what you think has gone down in the last 24 months, and no matter your opinion, we can't deny that none of this would have happened without him. And I think that does afford him some respect. And whilst of course, there's great consternation about the financial state of the club at the moment, and we can all wonder what might have been had he sold to someone who you might speculate had more spending power. But it is a sad state of affairs now that the man is talking that he's reluctant to perhaps come back. I've noticed that he's always been at the games now behind closed doors. Every time I've been down there, he's always been sat there a couple of rows in front of Phil. And so, you know, I'm guessing that if that is true, it's going to be a reaction to obviously the fans being there. And I for one, I don't know. I feel like I have higher estimation of Huddersfield Town fans. Really, I know that we can be a moany bunch, but I don't really expect that 4 sides of the ground will turn on Dean Hoyle that way. Maybe that's too optimistic. Of course, there'll be people who turn, and there's people who turn on Janino Bacuna every week, for example. But there's been far less popular figures. There's been far less popular figures walking the tunnels of the main stand before a game. So I really hope it doesn't come to that, and I really hope that Dean does continue to take his place in the stand. And I was really sorry to hear that he felt that was going to be that position was going to be untenable in the future. I also thought that the podcast was very revelatory, and whilst I never thought it was going to be particularly controversial, it was quite interesting because we did hear a lot of new information. And yet you can't, of course, deny that there was an element of misfortune about our downfall. I don't want to play that because, you know, no one gets relegated solely on bad luck. You know, we were the orchestrators of our own undoing. But the interesting snippet, if no one's heard about the potential signing of Adama Traore, and not signing off on the deal quick enough. Dean was on holiday in the US. He was negotiating with David when we were here. He didn't sign off. Was it Tony Pulis that was manager when we were trying to buy Traore? Injured himself in a preseason friendly because we didn't sign off on the deal quick enough. We had personal terms agreed and everything. Broke his collarbone. Wagner didn't want to wait for 6 weeks. He went to Wolves, you know, and is now firmly established in their side. But then I thought more key was what was said about the players. And the players are getting off scot-free here, really, because Dean, okay, is still around the club. And yeah, okay, there's questions to be asked of the events of the last couple of years. But he's not responsible really for what goes on once the referee's whistle's blown at the start of 90 minutes. And we said this at the time too, and a lot of players there started to believe their own hype, and that's mirrored in what Dean says. And I, for one, believe him. I think that, and Dean's quite honest about the fact that the appointment of Jan was poor. We tried to do things on the cheap. Perhaps we were aware that we'd overspent, and that was never going to happen. We needed a firefighter to try and keep us in the division. And Jan never had the respect of the players who, now being guffed up by agents, really thought that they were something. And so, yes, I think really that we look at Dean, but we should point fingers, perhaps if anyone, at the players first, really, because the squad wasn't particularly too different to the one the season before. And then and I think egos perhaps got the best of us. And that's an aspect that tends to get missed. As in terms of what's said about the sale, well, there's a lot of information put out there. And I'm reluctant to go ham on it, given that we've only had Dean, one side of it, you know, we've only had Dean's picture of it. And whilst he did speak very candidly, I would just like to hear more from the club about it, really, because again, you've had all the transparency from the minority shareholder and the former owner, but there's still so much, you know, smoke and mirrors going on around the finances of the club, the greater finances of the club. And I know that people will often say, okay, well, it's a football club. What business is it of Cameron Popey and Kilroy and Gaz Kay? You know, it's not about that, but it just goes to show that the communication we had under Dean was so much better, given that he's still communicating better than the club is at the moment. And it's a real shame, because I feel that people at the very, very top could learn a lot from what's come out, given that we had an update from Mark Devlin that said very, very little. And so for me, that was perhaps more intriguing than what was said, was the manner in which the club spoke out this week, through Mark Devlin, saying square root of nothing, really, and the way that Dean spoke out. And so something still is going wrong and something is misfiring. As for the actual deals themselves, well, I think there's people on this podcast far more business-like than myself that will be able to pick apart what was said in finer detail. But that was the thing that stood out for me, the fact that we actually had some word and it still wasn't from the club. And it just goes to show the shift off the field, I think, in the time we've had since Dean has left the club as majority shareholder.
Yeah, I don't want to kind of linger on it too much, but because I think it's been said. But I think the big thing that came out this week for me was how obvious it is that the club, and to a certain extent, I don't want to kind of pick on them too much, because Dean is obviously good at this. But the club came out with with their promised monthly update, and really kind of they're really unable to read the room, I guess, to a certain extent. And Dean, as Cam said, in quite simple ways, mentioning things like Adama Traore's signing is just the kind of thing that people want to hear, and whether it's irrelevant now, it's as irrelevant as the time that Town were going to sign John Terry. It's kind of irrelevant to us, but it's what someone wants to hear right now, and the kind of juicy bits of gossip or information that fans just want to hear from the club that, appease quite a lot of fans. And I appreciate that, there is the finances, and there is kind of actually more important issues, but they're the kind of things that make football fans tick to a certain extent. And I think the club could do a lot worse than either use Dean or try and involve Dean in some way in improving that communication to fans. In terms of kind of what Dean said, and I think I've said this previously, it's, to me, as Gaz said, it's given us probably the best times that we're going to see at Huddersfield Town. Dean facilitated that. Let's not get past that, and I appreciate that might have been marred kind of with him taking money out, but to a certain extent, I feel that's his prerogative. I guess the disappointing thing, and something probably that Phil would have been hammered even more than Dean has been, but that he said that the money would stay in the club, and obviously decided against that. I think that probably is the bit that kind of doesn't stick overly well with me. But I feel like it's really sad that such a legend, that has facilitated something like this, feels the way that he now does. From being kind of the passionate bloke that we've all seen dancing on that grainy footage, jumping over at fence, celebrating on the pitch, to not really feeling like he wants to go to the ground and not really feeling like he's got a connection with his club, is pretty sad, really. And I think probably to a certain extent, in some capacity or another, or in some way or another, perhaps the club or the fans need to kind of take a step back and maybe realise what Dean has done, and maybe kind of recognise that.
He danced around the finance element and taking out his money, and I've said before, at the end of the day, it's his money. Whether we like it or not, it's his money, so he's entitled to take it back. His point that he never charged interest is a really good one, because the vast majority of owners who put loan notes onto a balance sheet would charge some kind of interest, even if it's nominal, and he hasn't done that. So, whether we like it or not, if he's even at a sensible low interest rate, that would have saved the club £2 million a year in the time he's owned it. So, that's not to be sniffed at. That he'd moved the repayment schedules in terms of how long it's going to take for him to get his money back. And he said several times, if I get all my money back, which I thought was quite interesting. He's not entirely convinced he's going to get it all, which I think says a lot. The PPG piece, so he was very clear he still owns it, and he values it at £5 million. Whether he's put £5 million in or not, we don't really know, but he values it at £5 million and has said that if he gets his loan repaid, he'll gift that to the club. So once you take into account, and these are his numbers, not mine, that once you take that into account, and the interest he didn't charge, and the expenses he hasn't done, and the other stuff he never put on the loan notes that he just shelled out for, the club has benefited by to the tune of £15 million. So, taking that on face value, he's put £1.5 million in a year for 10 years, and then he's going to walk away. Now, if it looked like that and we were still in League One, nobody'd be complaining. So I have a bit of sympathy with him. My biggest issue still is around the takeover. I said before, our chance for proper, serious investment has been and gone. That ship has sailed. We're stuck with what we've got now. He talked about the potential foreign owners wanting to put the debt on the balance sheet as a loan and charge interest, but have a proper go at getting promoted back to the Premier League, in which case they could easily repay those debts. But how do we know Phil's not going to do that? How do we know that Phil's not currently borrowing them, because we haven't seen any accounts that Phil hasn't borrowed the money to buy the club and put that as a loan note against HTFC from his sporting ventures business? There's a lot of questions around how Phil is funding and running the club that remain unanswered. And Dean never really came to the point of, what was Phil the only show in town beyond these two foreign investors? I don't really understand how a Premier League club, even a struggling Premier League club, had 3 suitors and no more. It all feels a little odd. He was very clear that Phil, quote, wasn't his mate. He said he'd only ever met him once or twice. Well, to give somebody who you've only met once or twice what he's presenting as the deal of a lifetime on something you absolutely love, there's something there that just makes me question a little bit. Because Dean's a savvy businessman. You don't get as rich as he is unless you're switched on. So lots of questions there. But if what he's saying comes to pass, that the club repays debt and he gifts Canalside to the club, then in fairness, he's leaving behind the club in a much better state than when he took it on.
I think something as well that doesn't get mentioned enough is the fact of how ill Dean got. You know, I mean, look, if everything goes out the window when that happens, and he said on the podcast, didn't it? It took him 2 years, near enough, 18 months, 2 years to get back up to normal pace again. And yeah, we've touched on it, haven't we? That, you know, it was far removed from the guy who was obviously so passionate about the club, and it was a huge hit, both him personally, his family, and Huddersfield Town when he went in. But I think again, yeah, looking at it, look, who are we to judge at the end of the day? And you say that he's lying there in his hospital bed and he doesn't know what shape he's going to be, or if he's, or you dare say if he's going to be leaving hospital. And so yeah, I can completely understand if he had completely gone back on himself and just wanted to secure his family's future. Like, and no one really could say much about that, because who could blame him? Who wouldn't do the same in the situation? And so again, we can only speculate on the details we've been given. And so for me, yeah, I think I've taken a while this week to make up my mind on what was said on the podcast. And yeah, okay, you can look with consternation at the situation we're in now and the fact that we've wasted our biggest opportunity, really. And that will always stick with me a little bit. But do I attribute that to Dean? Look, it wasn't a great sale of the club. It wasn't the one we'd all wanted. But, you know, does it undo all the work that he did over the 10 years to get us to where we were? Like, it certainly doesn't undo that for me. And we've certainly had that. And so I don't know. It's never going to be a black and white question, is it? And everyone will have their own opinions. And some people will pick holes in what has been said. But for me, look, it doesn't change it now. The fact is, I've sort of, in a sense, I'm slightly over it now, in the sense that, okay, we know that this is like the new Huddersfield Town. That's in the past. And so, look, if more details come out, then yeah, it'd be great to go over them in more detail. But for me, now, Dean made this club what it was, and for a brief period, it'd be with the envy of everyone in the top two divisions. And so, you know, it's a tricky one, and it's a really horrible and sour end to the story, and I really wholeheartedly hope that he can come back to the club. But yeah, again, there'll be people who say I've been drinking the Kool-Aid, etc. I don't know. I'm tired. I know, but I'm tired of the situation.
I've just listened to 10 minutes, and I wrote so many notes down. Let's start with the different transfer to Phil Hodgkinson. You got someone, you know, saying that due diligence was taken with the ownership, then saying he'd already met him twice before at events that were organised through Sean Jarvis. So there's already a climb down. There's already a contradiction in what was told to us 2 years ago. Now, again, caveat: Dean Hoyle was severely ill, and I'm extremely happy that he's he's fighting fit and he's got his health, and he can enjoy his wealth. That's very, very important. There's an assumption that, Dean Hoyle, you know, without him, we probably wouldn't have been in that position. But let's not forget we got very, very, very lucky. Let's not forget at the start of the 2014-15 season, he had a hissy fit, went on Radio Leeds, threatened to basically pull his money out of the club unless the fans got behind him. You know, this is after Mark Robbins had his backroom staff stripped from underneath him. Town fans booing on the opening day, Hoyle going on Radio Leeds, as I've said, saying, Radislav Majewski came off in tears because they were booing him. No, the Town fans were booing the 4-0 defeat against Bournemouth, where Matt Crooks was ended up playing centre-back because Mark Robbins was making a point. You know, there needs to be a kind of not a eulogising of Dean Hoyle's tenureship, but a fair and proper critique of it. Now, I am having to play devil's advocate here and be that negative bastard because, you know, you guys have been very happy with it. But, you know, Dean Hoyle's always come out and said, well, we nearly signed X, Y, and Z. You know, we had it with Ricky Lambert back in 2009. We had it with, several other players. You know, there's also players that we should have bought that, you know, he didn't stump up the money for. James Tarkowski at Oldham, Sean Morrison, both of whom were a hell of a lot better than what we had. So, you know, I think we need to look at this pragmatically. You know, we haven't heard from Dean Hoyle for a very long time. He hasn't, you know, obviously for health reasons, but, you know, going on his son's mate's podcast where the hard questions weren't asked, I think is an easy cop-out. Now, and again, I am playing bad cop in this because sometimes you have to play bad cop, but, you know, there's a lot of questions that came out of that I don't think that you can just ignore. yes, it's disappointing that a fan of the club feels that he cannot go again. But then again, I don't think the toxic social media element that he was mentioning was that of Phil. It was actually the criticism he's been receiving, which is, for my opinion, and quite a lot of is pretty tame compared to what poor Phil has had to, the standard of criticism that Phil got, which was way out of order, bang out of order, and he should have never received that. But I think critiquing somebody's tenure, there's nothing wrong with that at all. And there were so many mistakes that happened in that tenureship. That's why I said we did get lucky. If you look at that squad that went up, we were extremely fortunate. And I think the key line for me, and I know I do obsess about recruitment, and I want things to be the best that they can be, is something that he said about Stuart Webber and David Moss coming in, who came in from Celtic, and who I'm led to believe was instrumental in bringing in the likes of Zanka, Lersel, and De Poitre to this squad, was saying he wasn't Stuart Webber. That's one of the biggest things to take out of that. How instrumental Stuart Webber was in building the club up to where we were, and I don't think you can underestimate us losing him to Norwich. The whole gardening leave snake thing that town fans attributed to Webber was a bit out of order in my opinion, because it's your own professional destiny, and he's certainly proven his worth at Norwich, even though they got relegated last season. I think that's one of the biggest things to come out of that, was how important Webber was to Dean Hoyle, and how Dean Hoyle and the football club were a bit lost at sea without him, and a lot of decisions that were made that are poor were post Webber, including the one with Alex Pritchard, where Dean Hoyle himself said that he went over budget on, and saying it was because David Wagner was obsessed with a number 10 and a number 10 like Alex Pritchard. I don't know, there seemed to be some attribution of blame towards Wagner for that decision, but ultimately the chairman has the choice to overspend his budget or not, and he chose to take it. So yeah, I know some of you might take it all in a little bit more than I would, but playing bad cop, I think you have to take that with a massive pinch of salt, because there are decisions that have been made that have not benefited the squad. The squad, yes, but the club at all. Let's not forget the share situation. They're still not in trust. We still don't know what's happening with them. These are big issues about the future of Huddersfield Town Football Club, and I think that's for me, Premier League. Take that away. Yeah, it was enjoyable throughout 6 months, but the rest of the time it's fucking shite. What's the future of Huddersfield Town Football Club, and is it in a better position than it should be? No. Is it in a better position that it could be? Definitely not. We've got to look at the future of Huddersfield Town Football Club, and I think that's all being forgotten because of, and I will give him a hell of a lot of credit for this. Anytime that he has faced criticism, he's at least fronted it, but the questions were not tough enough because the platform he was on was not tough enough.
It was one way though, Greg. It's same as the communication we've had from the club. It was one way. The difference is Dean's more adept at it, and the quality of his output was better. I think the one you're talking about, where does that leave us as a club? He mentioned on a couple of occasions fans' expectations. Well, I think with or without Dean Hoyle, our expectation was, when you've been promoted to the Premier League for 2 seasons, that when you come back down, you're a better club than the one that went up. And I can't think of anybody who argues we're in a better position. Now, the club will argue Canalside puts us in a better position because we didn't have that and we didn't own it. But I think that's some of the problem. He was talking about, I was thinking about this, his thing about the players becoming Billy Big Bollocks in the second season. And I remember there was an article, I think, in the Times of the Independent in the first season, where they went to Canalside and Christopher Schindler was standing in the queue for his lunch, and next to him was a bloke that was just having a break from playing a game of snooker, having a two-way conversation with the guy. The second season, gates went up, nobody was allowed in the building, it became a Premier League venue, and we made that even worse now. So, as I said, that second season, I think it broke the club. I really do. And as far as expectations goes, my expectations is we were going to be competitive. You know, certainly the top half of the league towards the playoffs. That would be my expectation after 2 seasons in the Premier League, and we're a million miles away from that. But you know, Dean's more adept at one-way communication and making sure that what he puts out is in a format that people want to hear. You've done well to pick some good salient points out of that, Greg. So I'll let one or two of the others have a go.
I think sorry, Carl. I just want to make a very quick point, and you've just made it there with the regards of coming down. Was that I think also fans' expectations are overestimated. There will be a group of fans who, and you know, I can picture what they're going to post, and it'll be on a championship that banter page. You know, where they expect X, Y, and Z. But I think the majority of fans, and I don't want to speak for you all. Our assumption was we're going to the Premier League for a year or two, come back a better club. And then the second point, something Laurent Depoitre said, and it's in regards to that canal side element, was I think players come into a football club that don't get the football club, and this is perhaps what Dean Hoyle was alluding to. Depoitre said in an interview after he left, which would have been last year, he said that he found it a bit embarrassing that, you know, players couldn't have their own privacy and they were after sharing it with any Tom, Dick and Harriet who's playing Crown Green Bowls and the thing. You know, it seemed to be, as you said it right, we went from being a community club, an open club. I've certainly been down there at the canal side going for some grub and seeing Naki Wells having some cheese and beans on toast after he's been training. Players didn't want that. So it's that trying to get that balance right between being that community club that we were, and we still are, by the way, even though it's been lost somewhat, and Cam's the biggest advocate of that, and being a professional outfit. And now, you know, you go past the gates, the Mark Devlin gates, as they shall be forever known, with his security shed. I think a lot of fans now feel like, well, you know, we could take a little bit more privacy, but it would be nice to be going down there having a couple of pints on a Sunday afternoon. Sorry, Cam.
No, I think on the back of that, I think there's some good points again raised, because yeah, you look at Canal Side and it was never going to last in the form that it was, and it was great. I remember going down before the second leg of the playoffs away at Wednesday before we got the coach and having a fight down there. It was great, like the nervous tension there, and they welcome fans who couldn't go to the game that night, couldn't they? But that was never going to exist in the way that it was, and if we wanted to develop, we couldn't have a culture where the snooker players were lining up next to the club captain. But I can see why everyone's frustration with it, because looking at it, yeah, I think that, okay, it needs to be one or the other, and I'm siding towards the other. But I can see everyone's grief at it at the moment, given that, well, really, what do we have to show for it? We've lost a massive community asset, and it's not like we're overperforming on the pitch to balance that out. And so, yeah, it would have quite been nice to hold on to that if all we were going to be is a bottom half championship club. And so, yeah, no, I agree with that. But for me, I think the way forward, of course, is if we're going to grow, is that we need to have a private facility for training players. And yeah, that would have been much nicer if it looked like the initial plans, but it's not going to. And like, hey, we've got a cryo chamber there, so we're all sorted out. But I mean, it's going to be something for the club and not for the fans. That much is clear. And that harks back to what we were talking about on last episode when Bala said what can be done, on game day, and that's what's going to have to stand in for what we've lost with Canal Side now, because the Canal Side is long gone. It's not going to be, you're not going to be going back down there for a pint before the game, and that's what needs to be done around it. Okay, that's the way to balance that out. Surely that's open there for the club. But actually, we've just said as well. I think it was Gaz said about managing expectations, and that was the thing that I had the most difficulty with in Dean's interview. Look, I've obviously got massive respect for him, and I appreciate it's one-sided communication, and what else did we expect when it was one of his son's mates' podcasts, from university or from school, and it'd be more interesting to hear it on a proper a fan debate. I don't think that'll happen now, and Dean doesn't have any accountability to have to do that now. He's obviously done that, honestly, off his own back, and for that I give him credit. But if we're looking at it, if we're going to look at it in terms of fans' expectations, I don't think that fans' expectations are unreasonable. I think we expected to be better than we are now. Okay, some people who came on for the Premier League bandwagon, yeah, okay, they might have expected too much, but I think the vast majority of Town fans I don't think we're over expecting, to be top half of this league now. I really don't think it's too much to ask for to think that we'd be in with a sniff of promotion and not fighting against relegation for a second year. So in response to the fact that expectations are too high, I don't know. I think that was a little bit of a scapegoat, to be honest, because I think any fan of any club would be hard pushed to say that this has been an okay response to 2 years in the Premier League and all the money that's come into the club. So that was the bit that didn't wash with me personally. And yeah, look, I don't want to comment on the abuse that's been dished out, because I've seen it to Phil, and there's always people who take it too far. So we don't know what else has been said. Some of it might not even be public, and so I can't speak for that. But what I will speak, I think that the fact that fans are expecting too much, I don't think that's true at all, to be quite honest. I think that we would have at least expected to mount a serious challenge in the 2 years that we've been back in this division, and we haven't. So yeah, look, there are holes to be prodded in it.
Yeah, I just want to kind of go back to what you were saying, Greg. I think some very fair points, and it isn't always the easiest position to take the kind of bad cop role. But I think probably it can be split into two parts. I think genuinely there can be an appreciation for what Dean did and what he achieved. I think on the whole, he had the club's intention at heart. He did invest the money in, where, as we saw previously before that, with kind of Ken Davey, etc., the money wasn't being put in. The club was kind of surviving, and yes, there was times that he threatened to pull out and had a bit of a hissy fit and wanted people to kind of love him. But I think we can just acknowledge that he did bring the good times, and I think he quite cleverly alluded to kind of Dave Whelan and Jack Walker in his interview, and sort of said, look at them versus what there is now, and I guess neither Wigan nor Blackburn are thriving, and probably had their best times with those fellas in charge, and we did. And I guess probably posing a little bit of a question back to you, Greg. What do we want as fans from a chairman? What is that kind of ideal chairman? I think for Dean, the second part of what I saw with Dean was he's quite obviously a savvy bloke, a savvy businessman, and he knows when and how to communicate with the fans and appease them when he needs to. But I think you're probably right that there can be a critique of him, and that there can be the kind of difficult questions asked of him. But as Cam said, I don't think now we're ever going to get that. So I guess to a certain extent, did we get the best from a bloke that as a chairman that we'll probably ever have?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and it's again, you're right. I'm playing bad cop, because overall, I think he was a massive positive influence on this football club. You say what kind of chairman I would like, and probably to you guys as well, but I want the Dean that was on it, the Dean Hoyle that was involved, because when we were good, we were always good when Dean was at the forefront of everything that we did. The years when he was properly interested, we were amazing. Let's not forget that the whole Wagner Revolution thing came out of that reigniting of his love of Huddersfield Town, and to do something a bit different. But on the flip side, let's not forget that he took a couple of years back off after that Radio Leeds interview, and effectively let Nigel Clibbons run the club, and that was probably one of the worst periods to be a Huddersfield Town fan. Again, this is the whole thing though. When you're looking back at is it 13-year, maybe even 14-year, it's a long time that he's been the chairman of the football club. Overall, about 12 years, I think. From that season when he took over, where Town were struggling, to where we ended up being when the transfer to Phil Hodgson came, overall a massive success. So you have to base it on the entire tenureship. But it was frustrating listening to some of the points there, because Gareth said it perfectly. It was one-way communication. It was convenient, and the questions. And I mean, me and Ian are very, very much on the same page as this. The academy is probably one of the worst decisions ever made. Is the disbanding of that academy, which is Dean Hoyle's decision, is the worst decision that has been made at this football club, because we've just got to Premier League. We were at the height of our powers, and it also showed that he's always convenient with the truth. He said it cost 1.2 million. It did cost 1.2 million to run, but the money from sponsorship and the money from the FA that covered it meant that loss was probably more around 400 to 500,000 pounds a year. And he mentioned those kind of sad losers who look into the finances afterwards, saying, "Oh, they don't know the entire truth." But I looked into the finances after that decision was made, and there were payments from the FA for it. So, you've got to take everything with a massive pinch of salt. But we won't, like he did make that point about Jack Walker, etc. You won't probably see another chairman like him. And again, playing devil's advocate, I can't see one for a generation, unless another town fan secretly really, really minted. But I doubt that, because it's town fans, isn't it? We're too grumpy, too miserable, and too kind of precious to invest our money into anything bar beer and football. But I also, on the flip side of that, saying the assumption that any foreign owner would be like the Venkies or like the charlatans who destroyed Wigan Athletic, that's a generic assumption, and we can never know who the foreign owners were, what the payment structure was going to be, and I'm not sure how a selling party can know how somebody's exactly going to pay for the club at what interest rate. Take all of that with a pinch of salt as well. We could. It's all about the future of the football club for me, and that's all we should ever be worried about. Is Huddersfield Town in 2021 better off than it was in 2012? It really isn't. And that's, I think, the biggest thing we can take from the entirety of that tenureship. And yes, there's an illness. Yes, there's all COVID. There's all these caveats in it. For me, it should have been so different. It could have been so different. And I think, Gaz, you've said a lot of wise things today. That wise older head of you sitting in your chair waiting for your COVID vaccine. No, but what you said today about overall is right. And I think sitting back, I think we've got to appreciate what's happened, but also be disappointed that it could have been so much better, and maybe getting relegated in that first season. And Dabo was on last week saying, should we get relegated to League One? And we were just like, fuck no, it's bad for the club. But in hindsight, if we got relegated after the first season, we would have had a much better group of players. David Wagner would have left, if he had left, in a much better way, and we would have been much better set up, I think, with the squad that we had to have another go again. But everything that happened in that second season broke the football club, and it's going to be. You look at Sheffield United this season. Chris Wilder is an amazing manager, and they have some fantastic players there. They've had a lot of injuries this season, but you could see how hard they had to work last season to be where they were, and I think that's broke them as well. The Premier League is a fucking difficult place. People don't realise that it's not only is it physically, but it's mentally. It's degrading to a lot of people how hard you have to work to be at that level. And I think that's the biggest lesson that we can take from it. If Huddersfield Town are ever to be in that position again, they've got to have the tools to actually perform at that level, and I don't think we ever had those tools. And I include the training ground, I include the fitness, the backroom staff. I think there's a lot much more that goes into a Premier League club than any football fan of a football league side like us will ever understand. So yeah, Tristan, there's a very good question, by the way, and I could ramble on for a lot longer, but yeah, I would like Dean Hoyle. The chairman I want is Dean Hoyle when he's fully engaged, and people like that are very hard to come from. Very hard to find.
Do you know why it was effective, Greg? Because he set the standards. And I keep going on about standards at our football club, and that was the difference. When Dean was there and Dean was leading, Dean set the standards. And if you didn't meet his standards, you were in a world of trouble. And that for me is the difference between then and now.
No, spot on. Well, we could critique that for. I've got so many. That's the thing when you listen to something like that, you note things down and think, oh, I'd love to know this. I'd love to know this. And again, also that openness as well. We said it at the start. For someone to come out and say what he did and do so much more than the current chairman of the football club and the CEO, it says a lot about the man. Shame. That's all we can say. Anyway, Chef Wednesday this week is much more important than looking back at the past, because we must look to the future. So hopefully Huddersfield Town can take those 3 points. We stopped doing proper predictions here, gents, but Tristan and Gaz, if you were a betting man, what would you want to see this week from Huddersfield Town? What result are you two after? What do you think?
Well, I'm after 3 points. I'm just
no, you are. You still want your 7 out of 9.
I do, yeah. I'm just trying to work out the last time. So Wednesday, lost to Reading, lost to Rotherham. This is going backwards. Lost to Luton, lost to Brentford, lost to Birmingham, lost to Stoke, beat Wickham. So the last time they won was the 9th of February. So they're on a pretty piss poor run. And in that, they've lost to Birmingham, they've lost to Luton, and they've lost to Rotherham. So they've lost to 3 or 4 teams in and around us. So I think anything less than a win, I'm going to be disappointed. I can't believe I'm uttering these words, but anything less than a win, I'm going to be disappointed, I think.
Yeah, naturally, we need to win, and I think Gaz and I were discussing it just before we started. If we win this, then I think we're probably as near as safe. I think just to add a caveat to that, as long as we don't lose ground on them. So I guess at the absolute worst, I'm taking a draw so that we don't lose ground to them. Losing is kind of unthinkable to a certain extent, because it just open that door back up when we've won this week. And I guess I'm saying that having watched us absolutely annihilate Swansea and then turn out a turgid performance in the week after that, I do expect us to be playing against a Wednesday side that's going to be more Cardiff physical, up and at you, than what we saw this week with QPR, who obviously, as we said before, probably are on the beach with the flip-flops on.
That's perfectly put. Must not lose. I think that's the way that we have to see it. If Mr. Pope is right, we're only 4 or 5 points away from being able to join those other clubs on the beach themselves, even though we don't want to do that. We still want to top our finish. It is manageable. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and insight this Sunday morning. I'm sure you've got better things to go and do. Cam Pope's gone to work. He's commentating on some game if you're betting on it on Bet365. So if you've heard his dulcet tones, I hope you enjoyed them. Lively debate as always. Let us know what you think. You know where to get us on the old social media. Don't be toxic though. You can critique us. Fair criticism allowed, but don't be toxic. Tristan, Gaz, thank you very much for your time. Cam as well. We shall be back next week, and hopefully we'll be back sitting on that metaphorical beach, awaiting our pub beer garden in a few weeks' time, with our tinnies in the fridge, waiting to get outside. As spring has finally started to spring itself out with the snowdrops and daffodils out, I think the summer is going to be much better than we expect it to be. And hopefully it will be for Huddersfield Town too. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.